The classroom was noisy that Tuesday morning as kids settled into their seats after recess. The smell of chalk dust and pencil shavings filled the air in Ms. Taylor's fifth-grade class at Pine Ridge Elementary. At the back of the room, a small boy named Devin sat quietly, his eyes focused on the math worksheet while other students whispered and giggled around him. Devin wasn't like the other kids. He never raised his hand even when he knew the answers. He never caused trouble. He just sat there, watching, listening, and taking everything in. He wore the same 3 faded t-shirts in rotation, and his sneakers had holes that his mom had carefully patched with duct tape. But what nobody saw was what happened after school, when Devin would rush home to dive into his older brother's high school textbooks, solving problems meant for kids 5 years older than him. Ms. Taylor had been teaching at this school for 15 years now. She'd seen thousands of students come and go, and she thought she knew how to spot talent. She had Devin pegged as an average student, not a troublemaker who needed constant attention, but not a star pupil either. Just another kid who would pass through her classroom and probably struggle later in life like many others from this neighborhood. "All right, class, settle down," Ms. Taylor called out, tapping her marker against the whiteboard. "Today we're continuing with fractions." A collective groan rose from the students. I know, but fractions are important. You'll use them your whole life." She wrote a problem on the board, 2/3 plus 1/4 equals. "Who can tell me how to solve this?" she asked, scanning the room for raised hands. The usual suspects shot their arms up. Tiffany in the front row, Michael by the window. Ms. Taylor didn't even glance toward the back corner where Devin sat. While she explained the process of finding common denominators, Devin had already solved the problem in his head. The answer was 11/12. He scribbled it on his paper and then started doodling in the margins, complex patterns of numbers that looked random but followed rules only he understood. The truth was, Devin had been doing fractions since he was 7. His brother Tyrell was in 11th grade and often studied at the kitchen table while their mother worked night shifts at the hospital. One evening when Devin was bored, Tyrell had shown him how fractions worked, and something clicked in the younger boy's mind. Numbers made sense to him in a way that people didn't. "Devin, are you paying attention?" Ms. Taylor's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Several students turned to look at him, some with pity, others ready to laugh if he got in trouble. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly, covering his doodles with his arm. "What did I just say about finding the least common denominator?" Devin hesitated. He hadn't been listening to her explanation because he already knew it, but he didn't want to seem disrespectful. You said we need to find the smallest number that both denominators can divide into evenly," he answered correctly, though that wasn't what she had just said. Ms. Taylor raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. "Well, yes, that's right. But please pay attention." She turned back to the board, and Devin returned to his private world of numbers. Nobody in that classroom, not Ms. Taylor, not the other students, not even Devin himself, had any idea that in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The quiet boy in the back row would solve a problem that would leave his teacher speechless and force her to confront her own assumptions about who could excel and who couldn't. For now, though, Devin just watched the clock tick slowly toward lunchtime, wondering if today would be pizza or chicken nuggets in the cafeteria, completely unaware that he possessed a gift that was about to be discovered in the most unexpected way. The next day started like any other. Kids rushed in from the buses, lunchboxes banging against desks, the morning announcements crackling through the old speaker in the corner of Miss Taylor's classroom. Devin slipped into his seat quietly, hoping not to be noticed. He'd spent last night helping his older brother with algebra problems, not because his brother needed help, but because Devin wanted the challenge. Today's math lesson was on converting fractions to decimals. Miss Taylor wrote several problems on the board and walked between the rows of desks, her patience wearing thin as students struggled with concepts she'd explained 3 times already. "No, Tommy, you don't just drop the denominator," she sighed, her voice edged with frustration. "You divide the top number by the bottom number. We've been over this." The classroom felt tense. Even the kids who usually cracked jokes were quiet, afraid to be the next one called out for not understanding. A girl in the front row was close to tears after getting her 3rd problem wrong. "This isn't rocket science, people," Ms. Taylor said, rubbing her forehead. She'd been up late grading papers and dealing with budget forms the principal needed. These are basic concepts you need to master before middle school. Devin had finished the worksheet 5 minutes after she handed it out. Now he was watching a small ant crawl across his desk, carefully drawing a path for it with his pencil to guide it away from the edge. In the middle of explaining a problem, Miss Taylor noticed Tommy leaning over to ask his neighbor something. "Tommy, are you listening or talking?" "I was just asking about the problem," Tommy mumbled. "If you have a question, you ask me, not Robert," she snapped. From the back of the room came a soft voice. "Actually, Robert's way is faster." The classroom went silent. All heads turned toward Devin, who rarely spoke in class. Even Devin seemed surprised by his own words. Miss Taylor's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me." Devin shrunk in his seat but continued in a small voice. "Robert was showing how to convert to decimals by multiplying both top and bottom until you get a power of 10. It's faster sometimes." The teacher's face flushed. She'd had enough today. Budget problems, her car making strange noises, and now a student challenging her teaching method. "Well," she said with a tight smile, "since Devin has so much to say today, perhaps he'd like to solve something a bit more challenging." She walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and wrote out a problem. 3x2 plus 5x, 2 equals 0. It was from her nephew's 9th grade algebra homework, something she helped him with last weekend. She'd struggled with it herself, having to look up the quadratic formula to remember how it worked. "Since you're such a math expert," she said to Devin, "why don't you solve this for the class?" A few kids snickered. Others looked confused at the strange symbols. Tommy whispered, "What's that X thing?" Devin stared at the board, his heart pounding. He recognized this type of problem from his brother's textbook. The room felt too hot suddenly, everyone's eyes on him. This was exactly the kind of attention he'd spent years avoiding. Miss Taylor crossed her arms, waiting. She didn't actually expect him to solve it. She just wanted to make a point about respecting the teacher and not interrupting the lesson. A brief flash of guilt crossed her mind. Maybe this was too harsh, but she pushed it away. Kids needed to learn respect. "Well," she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we're waiting." Devin stood up slowly. His legs felt wobbly as he walked to the front of the class. The marker looked huge in his small hand as he took it from Miss Taylor. He could smell her coffee breath as she stepped back, a satisfied smile on her face. What happened next would change everything. Devin barely touched his lunch. The cafeteria buzzed with noise all around him, but he sat alone, pushing mashed potatoes around his tray. Kids from his class kept glancing his way and whispering. A few even smiled at him, kids who had never noticed him before today. The lunch lady frowned as he dumped his nearly full tray. "You feeling okay, honey? Not hungry today?" Devin shrugged. "Just nervous," he mumbled. Walking back to Miss Taylor's classroom felt like the longest journey of his life. His sneakers squeaked on the freshly waxed hallway floor. What would she say? Was he in trouble for showing off? Would she call his mom? The classroom door was half open. Devin knocked softly. "Come in," Miss Taylor called. She was sitting at her desk, looking at some papers. When she looked up, Devin was surprised to see her eyes were red, like she'd been crying or rubbing them too hard. "Sit down, Devin," she said, pointing to a chair she'd pulled up beside her desk. Devin sat stiffly, hands folded in his lap. The clock ticked loudly in the silent room. "How did you know how to solve that problem?" Miss Taylor finally asked. Her voice wasn't angry like he expected. It sounded tired and confused. Devin stared at his shoes. "My brother's in high school. I look at his books sometimes when he's doing homework." "Sometimes? Or all the time?" He shrugged again. "I like math. It makes sense to me." Miss Taylor sat back in her chair, studying him with new eyes. This quiet boy she'd barely noticed all year suddenly looked different to her. "Devin, I owe you an apology," she said after a long pause. His head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. "What I did wasn't right. I put that problem on the board to embarrass you, and that was wrong of me." Her voice cracked slightly. A teacher should never try to make a student feel small. Devin didn't know what to say. Teachers didn't apologize to kids. That wasn't how things worked. Miss Taylor continued, "I've been teaching so long, sometimes I think I know everything about my students just by looking at them. I put you in a box without ever really seeing you. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. "This is your last math test. You got a B+." She slid another paper from a folder. "But look at your answers. You solved every problem correctly, but you made careless mistakes copying numbers." Devin nodded. "I get bored with the easy stuff." "Were you bored today with that quadratic equation?" A small smile crept onto his face. "No, ma'am." Ms. Taylor took a deep breath. "I made a lot of assumptions about you, Devin, about what you could and couldn't do, and I was wrong." She looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm sorry." No adult had ever apologized to Devin before. It made him feel strangely grown up, like he mattered. "It's okay," he said softly. "No, it's not okay, but I want to make it right." She pulled out another book from her bag. "This is an 8th grade pre-algebra book. I'd like you to try some problems from chapter 3 tonight. If they're too easy, we'll find something more challenging." Devin's eyes lit up as he took the book. He flipped through the pages, already spotting patterns and formulas that excited him. "We need to talk to your parents too," Ms. Taylor said. "You should be in an advanced math program. There's a district test next month for the gifted program." "My mom works a lot," Devin said, suddenly worried. "She can't come to meetings and stuff." Ms. Taylor nodded. "We'll figure it out. Maybe I can visit your home, or we can talk on the phone." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Kids would be back soon. "Can I keep this book tonight?" Devin asked, still holding the pre-algebra text. "Of course," Ms. Taylor said. She hesitated, then added, "And Devin? Thank you for teaching me something important today." As students began filing back into the classroom, Devin returned to his seat, the math book clutched tightly to his chest like a treasure. For the first time all year, he felt seen. That evening, Devin's mom got home just after 7, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She dropped her heavy bag by the door and kicked off her shoes with a tired sigh. The apartment smelled like pasta. Devin's older brother had cooked dinner again. "Hey baby," she said, kissing the top of Devin's head. "How was school today?" Devin looked up from the pre-algebra book spread open on their small kitchen table. "It was different," he said. His mom grabbed a plate of lukewarm spaghetti and sat across from him. "Different how?" She noticed the unfamiliar textbook. "That's not your usual homework." Devin's brother Tyler joined them, curious about the new book too. "Isn't that like middle school stuff?" he asked, peering over Devin's shoulder. Slowly, Devin told them what had happened in class. As he described solving the equation on the board, Tyler's eyes grew wide. "No way, that was the quadratic formula. We just learned that last semester." Then Mom looked confused. "Hold on," she said, setting down her fork. "Your teacher tried to embarrass you with a hard problem." Devin shrugged. "She apologized after." "She better have," his mom said, anger flashing across her tired face. "So what's this book for?" "Ms. Taylor says I might be good at math. Like really good." Devin's voice was quiet but excited. "She wants me to take a test for the gifted program." His mom's expression softened. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I always knew you were smart, baby. You've been figuring things out on your own since you were tiny." She looked at the book again. "So these problems aren't too hard for you?" Devin shook his head. "They're fun, like puzzles." Tyler ruffled his little brother's hair. "No wonder you've been asking me all those questions about my homework, you little genius." Then Mom looked thoughtful. "The gifted program, that's at Central, right? All the way across town." Devin nodded. Central School had computers in every classroom and a real science lab. But it was a 40-minute bus ride away. "Ms. Taylor wants to talk to you about it. She said she could come here or call you." His mom sighed. "I'm working doubles the rest of this week. Maybe next Monday." She looked worried. "This is a big deal, Devin. Why didn't you ever tell me you were so good at math?" Devin shrugged again. "Nobody ever asked." Those 3 words hung in the air, making his mom's eyes fill with tears. She worked so hard to keep a roof over their heads that she barely had time to check homework, let alone discover hidden talents. 2 days later, Miss Taylor surprised everyone by showing up at their apartment after school. She brought a folder full of papers, Devin's old tests, information about the gifted program, and application forms. Devin's mom had swapped shifts with another nurse to be home. She served Miss Taylor coffee in their good mugs while they talked at the kitchen table. I've been teaching for 15 years, Ms. Taylor explained, and I've never seen natural mathematical ability like Devon's. He solved a high school algebra problem with no formal training. She spread out Devon's previous work. Look at these patterns. He gets bored with simple problems and makes careless errors. But give him something challenging. She pulled out the photograph she'd taken of his work on the quadratic equation, and he shines. Devon's mom wiped away tears. His father was good with numbers too before he passed. I always thought Tyler took after him, but maybe it's both boys. Ms. Taylor explained about the testing process. It's next Thursday. If he qualifies, and I'm certain he will, the gifted program would start after winter break. That school's far from here, Devon's mom said. The bus fare would be tough, and I can't drive him with my shifts. Ms. Taylor nodded. There's a scholarship that covers transportation, and Devon would qualify for the free lunch program there too. She hesitated. I've already spoken to the district coordinator. They're excited to meet him. Later that night, after Ms. Taylor left and his mom went to work, Devon sat on his bed flipping through the program brochure. The school had a math club, advanced classes, and even trips to the university for special projects. For the first time, he let himself imagine a different future. The next few weeks brought changes no one could have imagined. Devon took the gifted program test in a small room at the district office, flying through problems that made even the test administrator raise her eyebrows. When the results came back, they didn't just qualify him for the gifted program, they caught the attention of the district superintendent. He scored in the 99th percentile, Ms. Taylor told Devon's mom over the phone. They want to move him up immediately, not wait until after winter break. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, things were different too. Kids who had never spoken to Devon before suddenly wanted to sit next to him at lunch. Tommy, who used to ignore him, now asked for help with math homework. Devon wasn't sure how he felt about all this new attention. You don't have to help everyone, you know, Miss Taylor told him one day after she spotted him surrounded by classmates during recess, explaining fractions instead of playing. It's okay to just be a kid. Devon shrugged. I don't mind. It feels good to help. Miss Taylor watched him with a mixture of pride and regret. In just 2 weeks, she'd discovered so many things about this quiet boy. How he taught himself chess by watching videos at the public library, how he could multiply 3-digit numbers in his head, how he stayed up late reading because that was the only quiet time in their small apartment. How had she missed all of this before? The question haunted her. One evening, Miss Taylor sat alone in her classroom long after the students had gone home. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to the principal. I need to speak with you about implementing a new screening process for our students. What happened with Devon has shown me that we're missing too many bright minds simply because they don't fit our expectations of what giftedness looks like. She worked late into the night, researching articles about bias in education and downloading new assessment tools that didn't rely on standardized tests alone. The more she read, the more she realized how many other students might be falling through the cracks. The following Monday, Devon's mom took a rare day off to accompany him to Central School for orientation. They walked through hallways with science posters and display cases full of student projects. The math teacher, Mr. Chen, showed Devon the lab where the math club built robots and programmed games. We have a competition next month, Mr. Chen explained. Usually new students observe first, but with your abilities, you might want to participate. Devon's eyes lit up seeing the half-built robot on the table. His hands itched to explore how it worked. On their way out, the principal stopped them. We're very excited to have Devon join us, she said, shaking his mother's hand. Miss Taylor has told us so much about him. They turned to see Miss Taylor waiting by the entrance. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had her own classes to teach back at Lincoln Elementary, but she'd arranged for a substitute teacher so she could be present for Devon's big day. I wanted to see you off properly, she told him with a smile. As they walked to the bus stop together, Devon, his mom, and Miss Taylor, something felt like it was coming full circle. Just 3 weeks ago, he had been an invisible kid at the back of the classroom, and she had been a teacher too busy to notice his potential. You know, Miss Taylor said as they waited for the bus, I've been teaching for 15 years, but you taught me the most important lesson of my career. What's that? Devon asked. Never to underestimate anyone. And never to use a math problem as a punishment, she added with a small laugh. Devin smiled. I'm glad you did though, otherwise I'd still be hiding. His mom put an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. No more hiding your light, baby, not ever again. As the bus approached, Ms. Taylor handed Devin a small package wrapped in blue paper. A going-away present, she explained. Open it later. That night, Devin unwrapped a brand-new scientific calculator, the fancy kind high school students used, and a card that simply said, "For when the math gets really interesting. I can't wait to see what problems you solve next." 3 years later, a local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Pine City Middle Schooler Wins State Math Competition." The photograph showed a smiling boy holding a trophy almost half his size. Though he was taller now, with a new pair of glasses and a confident posture, it was unmistakably Devin. Ms. Taylor cut out the article and pinned it to the bulletin board in her classroom. Every day, she looked at that picture and remembered the quiet boy who had changed the way she taught forever. The school district had implemented her new screening program for identifying gifted students 2 years ago. Since then, 17 kids from Lincoln Elementary had qualified for advanced programs, kids who, like Devin, might have been overlooked before. Is that the boy who solved the high school problem? A new student asked, pointing to the newspaper clipping. Yes, Ms. Taylor replied. That's Devin. He used to sit right where you are sitting now. The story had become something of a legend at Lincoln Elementary. Teachers whispered it to each other in the break room as a reminder to look deeper, to see potential where they might have missed it before. One spring afternoon, Ms. Taylor received an unexpected visitor. Devin stood in her classroom doorway after school, looking both familiar and different, taller, more confident, but with the same thoughtful eyes. "Devin," she exclaimed, rushing to greet him. "What a wonderful surprise." He smiled. "I'm doing a project for school. We have to interview someone who made a difference in our lives." He held up a notebook. "I picked you." They sat at a desk by the window, sunlight streaming across papers covered with equations much more complex than the one he'd solved 3 years ago. "So," Devin asked, "how has your teaching changed since that day?" Ms. Taylor took a deep breath. "I listen more. I watch more carefully. I never assume I know what a student is capable of based on how they look or where they come from," she smiled. "And I never, ever use a math problem as punishment." Devin laughed. "That worked out pretty well for me, though." "It did," she agreed. "But it shouldn't have taken something so dramatic for me to see what was right in front of me all along." Devin told her about his life at Central, the robotics team he captained, the mentorship program where he helped younger kids discover their own love of math, the college-level calculus course he was taking online. "My mom's going back to school too," he said proudly. "For nursing. She says if I can do hard stuff, so can she." As they wrapped up the interview, Devin hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever regret what happened that day? When you put that problem on the board?" Ms. Taylor considered the question carefully. "I regret my intentions," she said finally. "I regret trying to embarrass you. But I don't regret what came from it, for you, for me, for all the students who've benefited since then." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a faded worksheet, the one Devin had been doodling on that fateful day. She'd kept it as a reminder. "Look," she said, pointing to the margins filled with number patterns. "These weren't just random doodles. These were fractals. You were creating complex mathematical patterns without even knowing what they were called. The signs were there all along. I just wasn't seeing them." Devin touched the paper gently. "I remember this. I was so bored that day." "You're not bored anymore though, are you?" He shook his head, smiling. "Not even close." Before he left, Devin handed Miss Taylor an envelope. Inside was an invitation to the state science fair where his team would be presenting their project, a computer program that could identify prime numbers using a new algorithm they developed. "We're going to win this one too," he said confidently. Miss Taylor had no doubt he would. That evening, as she added the invitation to her bulletin board next to the newspaper clipping, Miss Taylor thought about how a single moment can change everything. One problem on a whiteboard, one quiet boy who wasn't so ordinary after all, one teacher learning that sometimes the greatest lessons come from her students. And somewhere across town, Devin was already working on his next big idea, no longer hiding his light from the world.